Welcome, everyone. I'm Randall Kuhn, professor in the School of Public Health, and I'm really loud, but I can use the mic. I have the great pleasure to have supported and worked with this amazing team of instructors in developing this course. We want to thank our co-sponsors, MedSJP, Consortium for Palestine Studies. And I just want to mention before, I know we have a whole program that Samira will kick off. I just want to mention the next Center for Palestine Studies event is right here. You can find it on their Instagram, March 5th, Terms of Servitude by Omar Zaza. It's about, social media and suppression of dissent. So highly recommend you check out that presentation as well. But for now, I'll pass it over to Samira.
Okay, so hi everyone. My name is Samira. As he mentioned, I am a member of the Health Not Punishment Collective, and a quick agenda for you all. So we're gonna do a quick round of introductions. Some of us from the teaching team are here. We're gonna have some welcome words from a member from MedSJP, and then we're gonna jump into our presentation where we walk you through our course creation process, what the class was about, how we dealt with administrative barriers, etc., and do a little course demo for you. And then we'll do a very brief Q&A of that, maybe for like 10 minutes max, and then transition over to Dr. Feroze Sidhwa's talk. He is a trauma surgeon who volunteers in Gaza. And yeah, that's going to be our agenda. How does that sound? Good? Great. Awesome. So I will now welcome, before we go, MedSJP to join us.
Yeah.
Yes, hey all. Sorry, I'm on the mic. Yeah, thank you so much again for inviting us here tonight to stand with you and to honor the brilliant organizing of the Health Not Punishment Collective. My name is Matt, along with Miriam. We're here tonight representing medical students for justice in Palestine at UCLA. We come to this space centering Palestine and Gaza, where the right to health is under relentless assault. As medical students committed to our oath to do no harm and to assure health and life, we know that health is not just clinical. It means safety and dignity. It means clean water, food, shelter, freedom of movement, and freedom from siege and bombardment. We know the systematic dismantling of healthcare infrastructure in Gaza is not incidental. It is deliberate and part of a broader project to destroy the very foundations of public health and the conditions necessary for Palestinian survival. And that is why we say liberation is not separate from health, it is a prerequisite for it. As many in this room probably know, the medical school, which is just next door to the public health school, has been one of the most intense sites of censorship and retaliation around Palestinian solidarity, education, and activism at UCLA. To quote briefly from the introduction of a report prepared by the UCLA Task Force on Anti-Palestinian, Anti-Arab, and Anti-Muslim Racism, at UCLA, students, residents, and faculty in the medical school who express support for Palestinian human rights and who offer any criticism of Israel's violation of them face harassment from within and outside the medical school, a sustained suppression of speech, and limitations on the academic freedom to teach about racial injustice and health inequities. Their professional lives are seriously impacted by this repression and retaliation. They learn, teach, and work in a climate of heightened racial hostility, lose professional opportunities, and find themselves unsupported and unprotected by the university when they are attacked, like many of you all were too, by those working to suppress speech and curtail academic freedom on the matter of Palestinian human rights. And I do want to name too that what's happening at UCLA's medical school is not unique. Folks might have seen that just last week, individuals wearing an insignia associated with the IDF's Golani Brigade were seen entering a training facility inside LA General Hospital. And the Golani Brigade is the same unit that's been implicated in massacring 15 Palestinian paramedics and rescue workers and burying them in a mass grave in Rafah less than a year ago. Through programs facilitated by both USC and the University of California, mainly through UCSD, bodies donated for quote-unquote medical education and research are instead being sold through lucrative contracts with the US Navy to train IDF military medical personnel. USC's contract alone is worth $700,000, and we don't know the extent to which similar financial material ties to war and genocide exists within UCLA's medical faculty and programs. I bring this up because resisting and defending ourselves against all of this institutional complicity and intimidation at UCLA has only been possible through the coalitions and loving, solid relationships we have formed with our public health comrades. We celebrate y'all for how you have weathered and transcended the same censorship we face in the medical school, have been able to create such an amazing public, free resource that we can all now draw from in our education and organizing. We desperately need offerings like this course so that we can strengthen our analysis, our resolve, and our actions. Together, we are and must continue to refuse the conscription of our public healthcare spaces into extensions of military power and genocidal empire, whether used against our own communities here in LA or against the people of Palestine struggling for life, dignity, and liberation. Just thank y'all and congratulations again.
Thank you. You want to come up and do a brief bios for each of yourselves and then like a brief introduction? Sure.
Hi, everyone. My name is Sandra. I was lucky enough to be one of the instructors of this course. I, along with Samira and others, was part of the Master's in Public Health program at FSPH in the Community Health Sciences Department. Graduated last year. Yay me. Still can't find a job, but yay me. So yeah, thank you so much for being here. We really, really appreciate it.
Hello, everyone. My name is Rafiq Wabi, and I am a sixth-year PhD student candidate in the Department of Community Health Sciences. Yeah, just changed that. Also was just very privileged and honored to be a part of developing this class. That's it. Thank you.
I'm Feroze Sidhwa. I'm a trauma surgeon out in Stockton, California, north of here. But I'm mostly here because I've volunteered in the Gaza Strip twice since October of 2023. And good to be here with you.
Okay.
Thank you. And I already introduced myself. I'm Randall.
I feel I already introduced myself.
Adjust the volume.
Is the volume?
Is there are y'all hearing the distortion back there?
That's like loud.
I think it might be when the mouth is too close to the mic.
Okay.
Because does it happen when I'm speaking from back here? Okay, yeah, I think because the tall folks were like closer to it, but since I'm short and I'm back here, sorry. Okay, so let's jump in. We thought it would be pertinent first to give you all a little bit of an organizational history for Health Not Punishment Collective and why it kind of became the space for this organizing and this work. So HNP began in the spring of 2023 as an initiative born from the Abolitionist Public Health Network, which is run by Health in Partnership, which is an amazing public health organization doing a lot of abolitionist organizing within the realms of public health. This started in 2023, like I mentioned. And the original intention of the student organization was to examine public health issues from an abolitionist lens. We weren't necessarily trying to focus on Palestine, although that is, of course, within the umbrella of abolitionism in general. But given the timing of the creation of HNP and this escalation and this genocidal violence, it just naturally kind of became the epicenter of a lot of the organizing that we were doing and that we have continued to do since then. Many of us on the teaching team also began our MPH programs at the same time as this ethnic cleansing campaign kind of accelerated in the fall of 2023. And we faced, like many other students in various departments, just a lot of institutional silence and departments that didn't want to acknowledge this crisis that was going on, let alone provide any kind of learning resources or anything like that for us to, dive into the content a little bit better or deeper. And so, as I'm sure many of you can relate in this room to, we were very devastated by all of this constant stream of news that we were just seeing live streamed in front of our eyes, and frustrated at our administrators and teachers who refused to speak on it even when we asked them to. So we did finally decide to move forward and just kind of create some drama and ruckus on our own. And I'm not going to go into the full details of all the organizing that we've done because we do have a detailed timeline that you can scan a QR code for at the end. And you can always come and just ask us questions after this presentation. I think there's better things to focus on, but we've done things like teach-ins, email campaigns, spoken to the dean of our school, vigils, things like that. And then ultimately decided to create this course and teach this course and now have it online accessible for everyone. After UCLA's solidarity encampment, which ended with, students being brutalized first by a vigilante mob on April 30th, 2024, then by the cops the next day, our students, some of whom were involved in that, were just very concerned and really, aggravated and ready to get onto something else. So our administration at the time made a bunch of empty promises of, teach-ins that they would organize as they always promised to do, but none of that happened. So that's kind of the point that we considered formalizing our own learning materials. And with that, I will hand it off to Sandra to talk about. Yeah, you're gonna get tired.
Come on. Rest is essential, folks. Yeah, so we really just, I guess this course was really born out of a lot of frustration that we all felt during this time, both from, lived traumatic experiences that a lot of folks in the encampment, but also the vicarious trauma of just seeing everything that was going on and not seeing any form of significant or just anything from the people that are supposed to be our mentors, right? We're an institution of learning, yet we could not learn about one of the worst public health crises happening in our lives. And so we really just banded together and decide to build, formalize that community, and also taking inspiration from the encampment and from the, community learning and the education that was part of that. We really wanted to be able to make this course not just for the public, but for ourselves as well, as how can we educate ourselves more about Palestine and all of the public health consequences that are happening due to the ongoing aggression. And so it was really just a group of us who said, we'll do it ourselves since the administration isn't doing it. We also really got inspiration from past precedent. So if you all don't know, here at Fielding, but also kind of anywhere in institutions, there's a lot of precedent of student-led courses and that instructors that take on, these social issues or current events that aren't getting enough attention and kind of doing it on ourselves. So there were student-led courses at Fielding in 2016 and 2017 that we really took inspiration from. And we really delved deep into those resources and the way in which the students kind of took aim and facilitated that. So, we consulted with previous facilitators of those courses. We, again, are the team of us kind of established who should be the teaching team, what the mentorship structure should be. We really did a lot of research into pedagogy styles, kind of what we wanted to do. We kind of took our own experiences as graduate students and really delve deep into, okay, if we're going to offer a course, yes, we want the structure for a graduate level course, but like what actually helps us learn, right? And sometimes that isn't the traditional ways in which a lot of graduate level coursework is taught. And so we really were intentional about making sure that we wanted to build a course, not just for the purposes of a course, but to make sure that it was a really good learning environment for everybody, ourselves included. Because we weren't coming into this as experts in any way, shape, or form. We were coming into it as learners, and we wanted to build a co-learning community together. So we kind of got together, put some topics to cover, theoretical foundations, case studies, and then guest speakers and experts. We have one of them in the room with us, and many, many others as well that are highlighted on the online website. So yeah, this took place kind of over many, many years, honestly. Like Samira was saying, we kind of a lot of us started our MPH during this critical time, and we were organizing all throughout. Finally, around winter 2025 was when we were in the syllabus development stage. What assignments do we want to have? Assignments, learning, learning opportunities, what readings did we want to primarily focus on? We very much wanted, again, like I said, to make a co-learning community, but we were also aware that if we actually wanted to teach a course, which eventually through the school, which eventually didn't end up happening, we needed to primarily focus on peer-reviewed literature. And so that's kind of where we started. Again, we talked about class format, how we wanted to do it, and just really looking at liberation praxis of how can we embody, the things that we want to see in the world through this class. So again, it was very much a co-learning community. Even though officially there were instructors of records, we kind of all went to it as students, and how can we teach each other about all of these different topics. So there was a whole system that we created in terms of figuring out what kinds of literature we wanted to include. This is a screenshot of the wonderfully long spreadsheet that we had, where we just started with different topics and titles for each week of what we wanted these foundations to be for the course. We put together a list of various different articles, and then we had kind of a ranking system where two of us would read each article. We would have kind of a vote of whether we wanted to include it, whether it was a maybe, whether it was a straight up no. And then we had comments. So we had notes about why that was the case. And then we met together and also discussed all these articles, why we wanted to include them, why we didn't, why we thought they were, why we should include them. We also made sure that anything that kind of was like a maybe or we weren't unsure of, we brought on an additional person to kind of be the tiebreaker, whether or not we wanted to include that as part of our course.
It's more of the same.
More of the same, yeah. So just, yeah, you get to look at this very, very long piece of just everything that we did. Lots of reading, but it was all very educational. So course syllabus creation. So again, we really took advantage of all the resources available to us and really learned from and reviewed a lot of different course syllabi, both from the student-led courses and as well as like other, courses that we thought were ideal to this learning environment. We went through 7 different drafts by the end of this process. And a lot of frustration because everybody in the faculty committees and even people who weren't on the committees had something to say about the syllabus, of course, and they all had feedback about things to cut, things that they didn't want on there. So I think we can safely say that this course went through more rigorous review than any course taught at UCLA. So yeah, that was fun. But here to talk a little bit more about the administrative barriers is Randall.
Great. Thanks, everyone. Right. So just as there's a formal curriculum and an informal curriculum, there's a formal review process, and then there's the informal review process. So just for background, it was literally in the weeks following the violent attack on the encampment and the arrest of the encampment that the community health science, that all Fielding School faculty came together, but then shortly after that, community health sciences faculty came together at a retreat. And sort of in the absence of a coherent plan for the kind of co-teaching school-wide spaces to emerge, it was basically agreed upon. I can't say unanimously, because some people say they didn't vote, but by consensus, with zero opposition, it was agreed that we would have a group of students lead a course on public health in Palestine, that course would be mentored by me, and that course would exactly follow the template of courses led in 2016 on racism that were, and again, student-led courses often emerge, we know, in a vacuum where there is no the school can't do anything meaningful. And so it instead lets students do a course. So that's sort of the bare minimum. So after the Ferguson uprisings in 2014, a group of students demanded space and got this course on racism and public health in 2016. Then a year later, a course on detention and deportation. And these were led by amazing students, mostly PhD students in that case, who went on to stellar careers in academia and have continued to struggle to navigate these kinds of spaces. So we were building on a very solid template. Again, we had guidance from the department chair, who was the person in my position of mentoring a course like this years earlier. And so everything, and again, we spent a whole 2 quarters, like a quarter planning, a quarter doing this rigorous review that Sandra described. And then we got feedback from our curriculum committee. And again, I know how curriculum committee works because I've served on it, I've chaired it at various points in time. And we thought we were good to go. We sort of had everything queued up to get approved by curriculum committee, respond to a bunch of critiques that Sandra showed, and then to get approved in a departmental meeting, faculty vote. And we had that meeting and a number of concerns were raised and the course was approved. Again, I don't know if it was unanimous. I know a lot of people voted yes and nobody voted no. And we thought we were good to go because generally courses of this type that are designed as kind of ad hoc, not permanent courses, don't go to the next level for review. We trust the departments to do it. We were building on a past precedent. And then suddenly, and so you see, we're right at January 27th of last year. We had the course approved, and then suddenly, right at the moment of, oh, finally, we've got something. We actually have a course that we're going to get to teach. That's when stuff started to emerge out of the shadows. So just numerous phone calls with unwritten requests for change. Some were saying make the course more empirical, less about healing. Some saying make it more about healing, but convey your positionality, right? Some were saying make it more about global conflict, not just about Palestine. Some were saying make it less of a colonial lens, whatever. And again, most of the, but the big critique that came out slowly as those critiques were sort of shed off, the big thing that was starting to be raised was students aren't allowed to teach courses at the graduate level. So that's one thing. So procedure being weaponized. Also, whenever that procedure is raised, what usually follows is blame the union. So it was students don't teach graduate courses at UCLA, even though 2 courses on the exact same platform had already been taught at UCLA, but also the union won't allow this. You can't have 7 instructors. You can't have unpaid instructors. So many different things. On February 13th, so almost a year ago, registration opened for the course and immediately was shut down, right? That the course appeared, we have screenshots of the course appearing on the registrar site, and then suddenly no registrations were being allowed. We found out that the course was being sent back to the curriculum committee for another vote. This time it would be an anonymous review and an anonymous vote in case anyone was scared to weigh in on the course. And then it would be sent to the university-wide curriculum, the Educational Policy Committee. Our curriculum committee, again, approved the course unanimously, even in the anonymous ballot. It went up to the school-wide committee, and that's where that's where the determination was made that we don't teach, that this course, we like this course. Again, they also threw out a lot of, a few substantive critiques, but basically it was this course would be fine if only we didn't allow students to teach courses. So we all gathered together as a team and made a collective decision. It's sort of, do we teach this offsite the way we want? Do we fight, take it to the press, whatever? Or do we sort of just do the best we can? There was support within the school to teach the course as an independent study with full credit. It could even apply to certain elective requirements. We could do the course on our own terms, but again, it wouldn't be recognized as an official course. And sorry, and so that was, and so here's just a little script of the email. So students are not to be appointed to academic apprentice personnel titles, nor to assume responsibilities equivalent to that. Again, and this was very much kind of written out by, numerous levels of professional curricular staff, not by the faculty. It was very carefully worded. So basically we agreed, I think we had, it was covered by the Daily Bruin, but not the LA Times. We sort of kept it local, but also then moved on to let's teach the course. And so let's get to the course. And sorry, as part of that, the other decision was let's focus the course on building a website so that everyone could, so we wouldn't be handicapped by these institutional constraints. Samira.
Okay, so a little bit about the course experience and what it looked like because of them taking off our course from the official site and us not having access to, you know, all the institutional platforms that UCLA uses. We had to kind of start from scratch and use our own. So this is what students would see on their end. We had one spreadsheet, the one on the left, that linked all of the official readings that we decided for the syllabus. And then because we had a lot of extra readings that were also awesome, but didn't want to have 1 week with like more than 5 readings, we created a separate tab for additional readings for the students who chose that path. I don't know if any of them actually read those, but that's okay. And then a third tab that's just all the other stuff. Maybe it's not peer-reviewed literature, but a really good news article or an op-ed or something that was written like Feroze's op-ed, for example, or books or film and audio, various websites that have good mapping things. So all of that was linked up there for the students to access and also add to. So throughout the duration of the course, students would be sending us things to add to this living document. And we're hoping also for the public version that folks can suggest things to add to this and it can just remain a living document of resources for all of us. And yeah, we had a total of 9 weeks of content with 6 guest lectures, 5 of whom are Palestinian scholars. And we are incredibly grateful for all of the time that they gave us, not only to speak, but several of them gave us feedback on the content we were covering each week and the readings that we were suggesting to the students. So it really, all of that just made the course a lot better than it would have been if we didn't have their input. And now I'm going to pass it over to Rafiq, who's going to talk more about the course experience.
Cool. So again, my name is Rafiq, and I was one of the instructors. And so we kind of split up each week, and a different group of students, whether it's like 2 to 3 students, each took responsibility for that week. And we kind of would meet up. So Noelle and I, we were in charge of week 5 for mental health and trauma. And just started to spend some time trying to think about what is it that we want to do and share in this module. And we started to split each module up kind of into 3 sections. So if there was a guest lecture that week, we'd have about a 50-minute guest lecture at some point in the day. And then we would split it up into about 50 minutes of reading and reading discussions. So the group that was assigned the reading for that week would create presentations, go in front of the class and kind of share an overview of the reading. And it kind of those students really dug deep into the reading while everyone else maybe like didn't, you know, necessarily read everything. So we'd have some time just discussing the reading, diving into it, and then take a little bit of a break, and then do about a 50-minute lecture or whatever the kind of guided time was by those students. So kind of give you a sample of what that looked like. Sorry, I'm just going to skip this. So, for example, for week 5, we kind of split it up and did a couple of different activities. I think Nadira maybe started off. I don't remember if she was in the beginning or the end, but we had a guest lecture that week. And then we kind of split it up into a couple of different activities. And the point is, you know, I think in a lot of classroom settings, whether it's in undergrad or graduate school or medical school, it really does follow, you know, a model of, you know, what Paulo Freire said, a banking model, which is let me just download this information onto you. So I'm going to explain to you a whole bunch of data and numbers and history about, you know, mental health in Palestine. And that's it. I'm just going to talk for, you know, 2 hours, and then you're supposed to like do something with that information. And I think for a lot of us who do some amount of organizing, or maybe who have, you know, spent some time trying to think of what is the role that education has in organizing, we know that it's not just about, you know, downloading information onto people, but it's having people get a chance to see themselves in the work, right? Or to start to really wrestle with what is it that I, as Rafiq, have been thinking about and struggling with, and what could I provide as a facilitator, as an instructor, and as a student in the context of a genocide happening in Palestine. So We started off by kind of having an example of really the resistance and the organizing that the Palestinian people themselves are doing. And again, this is important as, you know, I'm a community health scientist. That's what my training is in. I'm not an epidemiologist. I'm not a statistician. What I do is I spend time with community to understand and learn the science that they are doing. So it's not I'm doing the science. I'm trying to learn about the science, the organizing, the resistance that community is doing, and then be able to explain that as a public health intervention or as a public health issue. And so in this case, we spent some time learning about a particular project that really focuses on mental health and using art as a form and as a way to process what children and what youth were experiencing during this genocide. And so this is called the Gaza Mental Health Arts Initiative, and it was started by Haneen Kouraz, and we'll share a little bit of one of the projects that are products that they kind of produced. So what we did was we first read this article and we read it out loud, and we took some turns just reading it. And again, this is an opportunity for us to really speak out loud words that maybe are not our own, but to really start to embody the things that we might be reading about. So I want to just quickly share, this is one of the videos that the class created and that we watched. So these are youth in Gaza, kids that they created this movie, and it's a cartoon, and just get a sense of what we kind of, the material that we engaged with to reflect on.
وأنت تعود لليل في بيتك فكر بغير لا تنسى شعار الخير ونحن نحب الحياة إذا استطعنا إليها السبيل ونحن نحب الحياة إذا استطعنا إليها سبيلا ونرقص بين شهيدين نرفع بنتنا من بنفسج بينهما أو نخيل نحب الحياة إذا استطعنا إليها السبيل ونسرق من دودة القصد خيطا لنبني سماء لنا ونسيج هذا الرحيم ونفتح باب الحديقة كي يخرج الياسمين إلى الطرقات نهارا شميل نحب الحياة إذا ما استطعنا إليها السبيل.
That's a poem by Mahmoud Darwish, and yeah, it's just really beautiful. Again, you can look it up. This is, if you want to take a QR code, this is her GoFundMe page. She's continuing to do this work if you want to support it. So again, the point of that, and the point of that, you know, video and really engaging with what is it that the people are doing to resist, that we're not just sitting in class and wanting to say, here's how people are suffering, that's the end of the story. But it's really about honing in on how do people think about these issues and then respond with healing, with care, with organizing, with strategy. So the next activity we did in this day was a pen pal project. And again, just kind of learning with the idea of what are people doing, having practical things that examples we can see of organizers, whether they're in Palestine, in Gaza, or whether they're here and traveling there, or if they're just here. So this example was by, it's Heather Alexandra. I think her new last name is Lamastro. And she created this project called Pen Palestine, which was just a letter writing project to connect students that were in college or in graduate school in Gaza to college and graduate students here in the States. And again, it was an opportunity, or she was realizing what is it that I am able to do? What am I good at? What can I do using my talents, my gifts, my connections? And from there, really build that out. So we spent time, again, reading the article. There was a Teen Vogue article just about the project, and then browsed the website. And then we spent some time ourselves writing letters to students in Gaza. We didn't have the time to make the connections and really build that out. I think it's something we want to do. But just as a practice of writing and putting, pen to paper, things that we are processing as students. And then the last activity, again, just kind of in line with this idea of trying to study and to analyze the work that's being done there. We did a kind of an organizational analysis of 2 different organizations that kind of do work in organizing in Palestine and specifically in Gaza. And the 2 were the Gaza Community Mental Health Program and Heal Palestine. And again, just going back to us as public health students and what we study, a lot of the times we spend so much time just thinking about an issue, quantifying it, describing it. But when you ask a public health person, what is being done to address that? The level of detail is often lacking. It's like, oh, we provide resources to the unhoused. But really trying to get in detail of an organization that's been around for 15 years in Gaza doing mental health work, what is it that they're doing? And just getting into things like their organizational history, their theory of change, the specific programs they have, and being able to describe that for 2 organizations they're doing on the ground work. I don't remember this.
This is just like another example.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah. So again, we really tried to include art and we spent one day making kites. So there was really meant to be a very multidisciplinary and really.
Sorry.
It's okay. It's okay. And really just try to activate all parts of our skills and things that we're good at. So people who are artists brought that in. People who cooked brought that in. And yeah. I think this is just kind of showing a couple of different activities that we did. So again, another activity was we created a timeline of kind of relevant activities. I think I forget when it started. But yeah. And this was us doing painting kites for the annual kite festival. And again, I remember most of our class sessions, but I remember this, more than I think any of the sessions. Just like a really beautiful thing, and getting again to sit in a classroom and we're thinking and we're reading, but really being able to exercise our healing and our thinking through art and through creativity, I think is really important. Oh. Yeah. I don't know if it's yeah. So I think again, just like our, the class was really meant to be a space to honor what we were learning and experiencing. And I think hopefully the encouragement is for you to do the same thing, to create your own class, to organize together. And maybe it's not a class, maybe it's like a 2-week fellowship. I don't know what it is, but again, I think thinking of just starting from a place of, hey, we want to come together, we want to address this, what can we offer, and going from there. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay, so as I mentioned earlier, there's a full timeline QR code there for anyone who's interested in reading more about just our process and the barriers we faced. You can kind of ignore the middle one because it's also on the last one, but if anybody wants to save that site, that's the course that is officially live as of today. It's also on the little flyers that are on the chairs. And if you're ready for it, we'll do a little course demo now of the website. Let me show you all. Okay, so here's the first page that's got the little syllabus linked here. And then, I have to move this little Zoom guy. I'm just going to show you the layout of every week. So it's going to be the topic of the week, a little introductory video. All of the readings are linked there. The slide deck that we used in class is linked there. A couple of discussion questions. Not every week is as robust as that one. And then applied content and supplemental materials. So sometimes it'll be YouTube videos, podcasts, things like that. And then the additional readings and resources button goes out to that spreadsheet that I mentioned earlier. And that's kind of the structure. And then we're going to listen to the introduction for week 8 to tie us into the talk that Feroze is going to be giving. So we'll just give that a little listen right now. Let me see if it'll work. That's as loud as it gets.
Hello, welcome to the first panel of the Palestine, Public Land, Power, and Palestine. Thank you for being here and learning alongside us. This is week 8 of our course titled After October 7th. Up until this point, we've been studying the context of what Rashid Khalibi called the 100 Years' War on Palestine, which focused on the public health impacts and outcomes on Palestinian life and society from the Nakba until October 2023. This is what we've been working on up until this point in class. This week, we'll do our best to wrap our minds around the immense escalation of violence perpetuated by Israel in their genocide and ethnic cleansing campaign since the 7th of October 2023. Whereas the 75 years between the Nakba and October 2023 were defined by a gradual attempt to choke off every aspect of life in Palestine, particularly in Gaza, the post-7th October landscape has been one of unimaginable devastation. Numbers certainly do not begin to do justice to what continues to take place, and yet numbers often dominate the conversation. The devastation encompasses each and every aspect of health covered in our previous weeks, such as almost all housing destroyed and most people displaced numerous times, most hospitals and clinics destroyed or made inoperable, and hundreds of medical personnel murdered or still remain hostages of Israel. Food access continues to be limited to starvation levels, with a complete land, air, and sea blockade of resources and over 95% of agricultural land destroyed. Maternal and child health is also devastated, most notably with 40% decline in the birth rate, nearly unprecedented in modern times, an intolerable burden of perinatal mortality, miscarriage, and stillbirth, and the reemergence of numerous infectious diseases. The long-term toll of environmental devastation is difficult to calculate, but included is the destruction of nearly all water and sanitation facilities, airborne, soil-borne, and groundwater contamination from weapons. All told, at the time of this recording, over 73,000 people are known to have been killed by Israel, 80% of them civilians, including 20,000 children. For the 2+ years of this genocide, life expectancy at birth dropped from 75.5 years to about 40 years, which can only be compared to the collapses occurring during the Rwandan genocide of 1994 and the Cambodian genocide of the late 1970s. As we process the immediate impacts of this violence, history and the teaching of this course force us to contemplate the enduring consequences of the genocide for generations of Palestinians to come. We do so not as an academic exercise, but so that we might support efforts to rebuild Gaza that are slowly underway as of this recording. The Crisis in Gaza report by Zainab Jamaluddin and colleagues lays the groundwork for that discovery. The report laid out scenarios for the scope of direct and indirect, short-term and long-term mortality, building on the understanding of how war, occupation, and genocide act as fundamental drivers of each and every aspect of health. How will Gaza rebuild its health system, and can any of the principles of building back better be applied while every aspect of life in Gaza, including 50 to 70% of their territory, remains controlled by Israel? How will Palestinians recover from the trauma of 2 years of devastation? How will years of undernutrition and environmental contamination affect not just today's children, but even their future offspring? These tasks will be monumental even before we consider that Israel has shuttered nearly every legitimate humanitarian organization operating in Gaza, and it continues its indiscriminate killing, with international powers standing idly by, complicit in their violence. This course and website is brought to you by the Health Not Punishment Collective. As always, please feel free to utilize any of the course material for your self-guided learning or classroom setting, whether you're a student, professor, or unaffiliated with the academia or public really these course materials should be accessible and shared openly with anyone who wishes to know. If you would like to support what we're working on, give us some love on social media, on Instagram, on Health Not Punishment _out.
All right. No easy transition away from that introduction video, but that kind of concludes our talk. So now we can have a couple of minutes for Q&A if anybody has questions about that process.
Can you scroll down to the rest of this page just to give a little bit of context?
Oh yeah, sure. Here are the readings from that week, our slide deck, a couple of discussions. Oh yeah, that's a fair point. These maps, so these are all really brilliant sites for mapping. If y'all are interested, I won't play this video right now, but I highly recommend just exploring all of these sites. This one is kind of navigated right on the page right here, but anyway, and then there's some movies linked. There's a lot more linked in the additional readings and resources because we obviously can't include everything here, but yeah, so we hope that you enjoyed that. There's also a little HNP archive here of some of the past zines that we made for graduation ceremonies and some of the letters that we had collectively written to our department. So feel free to take a look through all of that. Welcome, Dr. Feroze.
Hey, everybody. So actually, this talk is going to be really short because the topic I was asked to address is what's the public health situation in Gaza right now, and there's not actually much that you can say about it. For the people who must be a way to do this. There we go. If you came to the lecture this morning, this is repetitive, sorry, but just to summarize, because I think maybe a shorter talk is better, than we can have, Q&A might be more useful. But the Gaza Strip before October 7th was all of these things that are described here. It's small, 365 square kilometers, is about the size of the city of Philadelphia, not the metropolitan area, but literally just the city. It was an incredibly densely populated place prior to October 7th, forget now. It was also incredibly poor. Unemployment was about 50%. People who weren't even looking for work was about half of the working age population. 80% of the population was dependent on humanitarian aid. It was a refugee population. About 70% of Gaza was refugees who were expelled from Israel in 1940, from 47 to 49. And they kind of overwhelmed the 80,000 people who actually lived in Gaza or in what became the Gaza Strip up until that point. It's also an incredibly young place. I don't know if it's the youngest place in the world, but it's got to be one of them. About 15% of the population is under the age of 5. And I think about almost more than 50% is under 18, and almost nobody's over the age of 60. It's like 96% of the population is under the age of 60. It's also a heavily repressed territory, and it has been not just since 1967 when the Israeli occupation began, but even since 1948 under Egyptian military administration. Just to give you a sense of how repressed it is, since 1955 at least, probably before that, but at least since 1955, outside observers who've gone to Gaza and can at least open their eyes and use their brain have described Gaza after coming back as something like a concentration camp. So if you go back to 1955, there's an American military veteran named E.L.M. Burns who starts to, this is all in Norman Finkelstein's new book if anyone's interested, but he goes to Gaza after World War II, where he's fighting in Europe. He goes and takes on a role at the United Nations. And he goes to Gaza. In his memoirs, he writes that when I arrived in Gaza, I realized it was just a huge concentration camp. In fast forward to 1967, a few weeks after the 1967 war, when Israel took over all of the occupied territories, Albert Gore Sr., who is Al Gore's dad. Al Gore was the guy who ran for president in 2000. His dad was also a senator. And Albert Gore Sr. goes to Gaza and he comes back, and on the Senate floor, it's in the Senate record if you want to check it out, he says Gaza is a huge concentration camp on the sand. Fast forward to about 2001 or 2. And Baruch Kimmerling, who is the Jewish-Israeli professor of sociology at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem, the chair of the department, actually, the George Weiss professor there, he writes in his book, Politicide, Gaza is the largest concentration camp ever to exist. Fast forward another 2 years, and you get to a really interesting source, which is Giora Island. He's an Israeli major general, kind of a proto-fascist guy. And he, in private conversations with the American ambassadorial team there, which were leaked by WikiLeaks, he tells them that Gaza is already a huge concentration camp, he was kind of describing what the Israelis were planning on doing to the West Bank. So, kind of across the political spectrum, across national lines, it doesn't really matter. Anybody who has a brain can see what Gaza is. It's been this way since, like I said, for multiple generations at this point. You all know that Gaza is militarily occupied. But a kind of unusual aspect of that is what's called de-development. This hasn't really happened elsewhere. There are other occupations going on in the world, the Western Sahara, so other places like that, Tibet, for example. But there are de-development is really something that's kind of unique to Gaza. Sarah Roy writes about it in her book, The Gaza Strip: The Political Economy of De-Development. If anybody's interested in reading one book that explains what Gaza was prior to October 7th, that's really the book to look at. What she writes is that a very distinctive feature of the Israeli occupation and the U.S. backing of it, I should say, was the destruction of Gaza's economy, and not just the economy, but even the ability to have an economy. So you've got the Palestinians, actually the Palestinians of Gaza, have a higher PhD density than any other group of people in the world. There's nothing they can do with their PhDs. In the West Bank, it's kind of the same thing. You might have land, but you won't be allowed to access farming equipment. You might have farming equipment, but your land will be taken away. You might have, et cetera, et cetera. There's just the constant undercutting of the Palestinians' ability to actually have an economy, which means to survive, right? I mean, an economy is not just a nice thing to have. You have to, if you want to have a human society that feeds itself, you better have an economy. Is really what's been the major mode of destruction of Palestinian society for a long time. And actually, this is the major reason that if you go to the Journal of Genocide Studies, you can see that in September of 2023, so before the October 7th attacks, there was actually an exchange of letters. Raz Siegel, the Israeli Holocaust and genocide scholar, was arguing in this exchange of letters and articles that Israel's policy in Gaza and the West Bank was already genocidal. Not in terms of the level of mass killing, obviously not that wouldn't qualify there, but in terms of its policies and its goals, it was already genocidal. Yeah, and then since 2007, you could argue since 2005, but definitely since 2007, Gaza has been under a land, air, and sea blockade that really has no precedent in history outside of World War II or maybe the time of Genghis Khan or something. In 2007, the sea blockade was formalized, and that was really the last part of it. And in just a year later, in 2008, Mary Robinson, who was she's an international stateswoman and was former president of Ireland, she visited Gaza and she said, after just 1 year of the blockade, she said their whole civilization has been destroyed. I'm not exaggerating. It's unbelievable that the world doesn't care about this while it's happening. Those are all her words. You can see here that blockade was punctuated by a really incredible series of military operations against the Gaza Strip. This, again, you're talking about a piece of land that is the size of one city in the United States being attacked by approximately 13 times through massive aerial bombardment over the course of maybe 15 years. It's pretty shocking, The 2014 Operation Protective Edge, Sarah Roy describes it as having dealt a death blow to Gaza's economy, which is probably correct. After that, about 80% of the population has been, or since then, I should say, 80% of the population has been dependent on humanitarian aid just for bare survival. So that's the situation in Gaza before October 7th. After October 7th, Gaza just becomes a different planet. It's not part of Earth anymore. Gaza is the deadliest place for civilians and aid workers in the world, according to the International Rescue Committee. That's probably still true right now, actually, even despite the so-called ceasefire. Gaza is once again the most dangerous place in the world to be a child. And again, that's probably still true even with the so-called ceasefire in place. The rate of killing of children in Gaza is actually not well understood. Just to give one example, in 2022, when Russia invaded Ukraine, and I've worked in Ukraine 3 times since then, when Russia invaded Ukraine, Ukraine became the deadliest place for children in the world. But if you adjust for the size of the population, because Ukraine had about 40 million people there then, and Gaza has about 2, if you adjust for the size of the population, the rate of killing of children in Gaza is something like 200 to 400 times higher than it is in Ukraine. It's just totally outright. 2 orders of magnitude difference is just completely inconceivable. Air Wars did a study where they looked at the differential rate of killing between the first 25 days the first 25 days of the Israeli assault on Gaza, and compared it to the worst year for children that they had ever studied anywhere, which was Syria in 2016. And they found that Israel killed about the same number of children in 25 days as the entire bombardment of Syria while fighting the Islamic State. So that's being bombed by the US, by Israel, by Russia, and by the Syrian government. That's pretty crazy if you think about it. Interestingly enough, they had only gone through about 70% of the data when they wrote that report, but they wanted to get it out because the consequences is just so shocking. They sent me the rest of the data, and actually Israel killed almost about 1.5 times as many children in the first 25 days as were killed in Syria in the entire year of 2016, which again was the deadliest year for children anywhere ever recorded since World War II. That's pretty shocking. Again, these numbers are just completely outrageous. You've already heard today that the Gaza has been the deadliest place for journalists really in history. I mean, there isn't even a close comparison. More journalists have been killed in Gaza than in World War I, World War II, the Vietnam War, including the attacks on Cambodia and Laos, the post 9/11 attack on Afghanistan, and the entire Yugoslav war in the 1990s. All of that combined. It's pretty amazing. And it's Gaza. Again, there's 2 million people in Gaza. World War II involved literally the entire world. It's pretty amazing. The Gaza has been physically destroyed far worse than any other place ever has been. And again, there isn't even a close comparator. And then you could even get down to such a small place as something like Hiroshima that had a nuclear bomb dropped on it in World War II. It doesn't even come close. It's not even like you're again talking about orders of magnitude difference. The Gaza is the thirstiest place in the world. This is probably still true right now. Anybody who wants to know the details, Oxfam, it's linked up there, but Oxfam wrote a good report on this called Water War Crimes. I think it was like July of 2024. It was quite a while ago now. And the numbers in this are really quite shocking. Gaza was able to provide to itself after October 7th, Gaza was able to provide to itself 4 liters of water per person per day. And that's not for drinking. That's for all things that humans use water for. And in the Mawasi, which is the area where you see the most of the tents set up, the beach west of Khan Yunis, where I was working when I was there. In the Mawasi, when there were 1 million people sheltering there, that dropped to about 2 liters of water per person per day. And those 1 million people were sharing 120 toilets. It's just completely ridiculous. To talk about public health in a situation like this is to say, well, why don't we go back to the Black Death or something and talk about public health there? There wasn't any. Famine, you probably all know about, but Gaza was declared to be in famine. My suspicion is parts of Gaza are still in famine right now, but nobody can study it. And the IPC seems to have lost interest. Gaza is probably the most wounded place in the world. This is, again, it's hard to find comparative statistics like presumably Vietnam in 1978 would have been worse, but today certainly it is. I can't again even think of a close second. And finally, Gaza has undergone the most direct and sustained attack on a healthcare system that's really ever been carried out. And again, Ukraine provides a good comparator. When Russia invaded Ukraine, Ukraine became the deadliest place in the world for healthcare workers. But the differential rate of killing of healthcare workers between Gaza and Ukraine is almost 100. It's almost 100-fold. It's just totally shocking. Well, Gaza today, from a public health standpoint, is I'll just read you some statistics, and then again we can just have a Q&A session because I think that'll be more useful. According to Oxfam, just rebuilding the water distribution network in Gaza will cost $800 million. There is no access to Gaza for Oxfam or any of the others. Oxfam is the major NGO that does water work in the world. Currently, Gaza is able to provide 3 liters of water per person per day. This is northern Gaza specifically. Every wastewater treatment facility has been destroyed or is offline because it can't be replenished. The water table is now 19 meters below sea level, which if anybody happens to be a water sanitation engineer, you know that's a disaster. In fact, in 2017, or maybe 2018, the UN wrote a report entitled Gaza in 2020, a livable place, ? And the main reason was the main thing that they were pointing out was that the water table has been completely destroyed, mostly by Israeli settlers. And now obviously the population is massively overdrawing it because they have no access to clean water at all, just continuing to destroy the place. There are about 250,000 cases of watery diarrhea diagnosed in November and December in children under 5. That's all of them. That's every kid. That's every kid in Gaza under 5. So every kid and I can personally attest to this. I'm pretty sure every kid in Gaza has had watery diarrhea for months or actually for years. Ever since I never saw a kid at European hospital that didn't have diarrhea. In fact, and this is a major problem. So, it's not just I have diarrhea. How inconvenient. When you're an infant who doesn't eat enough, has no access to clean water. When you get repeated bouts of diarrhea throughout your life, you get weaker and weaker and weaker. You grow less and less and less. You don't reach your potential if you happen to survive at all, and you end up in a very, very bad situation. Basic healthcare has basically been obliterated in Gaza. 80-something% of primary clinics have been physically destroyed. A huge proportion of the healthcare workforce has been murdered or has fled or is in Israeli prisons still. Obstetric care is about to take a huge hit in the Gaza Strip with the expulsion of MSF, with Doctors Without Borders. Somebody mentioned already that the Israelis are, with U.S. backing, are implementing a kind of an administrative, nonsensical administrative procedure to throw out the NGOs that work in Gaza and the West Bank. Hopefully, their hope is that they'll replace them with something like the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, which is just a killing machine. And right now, MSF births half the babies in Gaza. This is just a total disaster. I mean, this is just one aspect of it. Advanced healthcare is just non-existent in Gaza. It's just a total joke to talk about doing cardiac catheterization or something like that. In terms of education, 90% of school buildings have been damaged or destroyed. And just to be clear, that's damage that you can see from a satellite photo, which has a resolution of about 1 meter. So it's not, it's not like a bullet hit the field. It's a wall is down, the roof is gone, something like that. 612 school teachers and 190 professors are known to be dead. It's probably significantly higher than that, but nobody actually knows the real numbers. Unknown numbers of school teachers and professors have fled. There's been 2.5 years with basically no organized education whatsoever, just ad hoc things like the art school and things like that, which are very useful. They do give children some sense of normalcy, just even if it's just for a moment. One of the things that's really kind of amazing in Gaza is you get there. Like when I was at European Hospital in March and April of 2024, you get there and, on your way in and the first night you think, how could I ever get used to this bombardment? By the second night, you're just used to it. It is really kind of amazing. And, these children are all running around. They just kind of ignore the ground is shaking. like sometimes windows are breaking. It just ignores it. It's really kind of an amazing thing, but you can imagine what that's done to their psyche. I had when I went back the second time, or when I went the second time, I met a cardiologist who told me this story just because it had happened to him just the day before. He lived just north of, outside of the destruction zone of Rafah. So he lived in the very, very southern part of Khan Yunis, in other words. And he and his wife and their 2 older children were in their apartment along with his 3-year-old or maybe 4-year-old daughter. And some gunfire from the Philadelphia corridor, that's the part of Egypt, or that's the border between Gaza and Egypt. That's, there's Israeli troops there now. Gunfire from there came into their apartment, so they all hit the deck, right? But the little 4-year-old girl just kept dancing in a circle and singing to herself, just entertaining herself like a little kid does. And mom and dad, obviously in Arabic, said, sweetie, what are you doing? Come here, get down on the floor. And she said, no, mommy, don't worry. The bullets are all the way up there. Look. In other words, this kid has internalized that she's forgotten gunfire is dangerous the same way some kids in LA might forget traffic is dangerous. This is what these children have been exposed to. So talking about their education is almost seems kind of silly. But just to point something out, UNICEF, UNICEF is the main UN body concerned with children. It costs UNICEF $280 to educate a child in Gaza for a year. It's nothing. It's literally a rounding error, and nobody even you could add the entire Gaza budget to the U.S. Defense Department budget, and nobody would even notice. It's just a total non-issue. The economy is gone in Gaza. It was gone in 2014, and now it's really gone. Average income right now is 50 cents per day, but even that's probably an overestimate. There's basically no work in Gaza. Unemployment is 80%, but I just want to stress that's for the people who actually bother to look for work. I don't know who that is. It seems completely ridiculous to go out and try and find somebody to pay you for something. Nobody has any money. The UN Development Program, and this is really what's critical to this, maybe understanding what's going on right now. The UN Development Program estimated in September, about a year ago, the UN Development Program estimated that it would take 350 years to restore Gaza's economy to what it was in 2022. And remember, in 2022, everyone in Gaza was dependent on humanitarian aid, 80% of the population, right? 50% unemployment, 60% youth unemployment. Is that some kind of accomplishment? No, obviously not. Now, that doesn't have to be the case. We could lift the blockade and we could actually remove the rubble, which itself will take 10 to 15 years, and we could actually rebuild the place if we wanted to. In fact, everything we need to do that is right outside of Gaza right now. It's all just sitting there. It's on trucks. It's, we drive past them. You've probably seen videos of it. Everything Gazans need to survive is right there. But it's a political decision not to allow it to go in. And that's kind of the last point here, which in a course on where we tried to integrate the downstream effects of social determinants of health with actual political and social consequences. Self-determination is just being denied to the Palestinians. That's the simple fact of the matter. You can get into all sorts of reasons why, but that's the base problem here. If the Palestinians had control over their own borders and were allowed to import normal things that humans use, then this just wouldn't be a problem, but they're not. And that's a choice that we are making. Not we can blame the Israelis for it all we want, but at this point, it actually is inaccurate to talk about an Israeli blockade of Gaza. They're under the terms of, again, what everybody calls the ceasefire. It's hardly that, but under the terms of this agreement between Israel and the armed factions in Gaza, the United States set up a what's called the CMCC. It's a Civilian Military Coordination Center in Kiryat Gat, which is just east of Gaza in Israel. This is a huge warehouse where on one floor, American uniformed American military personnel have a base, a logistics base, where they're supposed to facilitate the entry of stuff into Gaza. On the floor above them is Israelis. And a friend of mine, an Israeli friend of mine, is a political ecologist who works, and he used to work in Gaza a lot. He went to the CMCC to talk to the commander and give him some information about Gaza's environment. And he said he was like, I've never seen such a joke in my life. There's these two huge screens on the wall. It's just one example, but he's like, there was two huge screens on the wall. One is a drone feed over Gaza, which you can't see anything. It's just a random drone feed. And the other is Donald Trump's Truth Social feed. It's like, this is ridiculous. The New York Times actually wrote a good report actually about the CMCC, and they pointed out that the U.S. military really does have the best logistics people in the world. You want to move a massive army to blow up Iran or something, you have to have good logistics people. So they sent some of these people to the CMCC, and they all just left after a few weeks. They said, this is completely pointless. We're not doing anything here. There's no logistical problem. The problem is we tell the Israelis, you need to let the Palestinians bring in this water sanitation equipment, and they just say no. And we say, oh, okay, that's it. Well, why do we need, you don't need logisticians for this. You just need someone with a backbone to say, yes, it's not your choice. Actually, those days are over, but they're not over. And that's the main problem, because again, the Palestinians just don't have self-determination. And I think we have to consider what this means. A lot was said about this course is teaching you about Palestine, which is good. It's always good to learn anything. But I think we also need to learn something about ourselves, because we're the ones doing this. The Palestinians actually don't have much say in the matter of what happens to Gaza. If we leave them alone, they'll build a decent society there. You can argue about Hamas and this and that, but it's totally irrelevant. Just like any other group of people, the Palestinians want to have a decent society. They have their own culture. They have their own ways of doing things. It's true, but it's hardly something that you or I wouldn't recognize as a good place. These two signs that were at European Hospital kind of illustrate the choice that we have to make. The first one says, "Enter this place with love and leave us with a beautiful smile." And I don't speak Arabic, but the Arabic Google Translate tells me the Arabic says the same. And this was right outside of a little girl's room that I took care of while I was there. The other, or sorry, that was outside of that was in the nurses station behind the nurses station, part of the hospital where I slept. The other one was right outside of that little girl's room. It says, "In Gaza, we don't care anymore about anything." And you can understand the cynicism behind whoever wrote that. You know, the whole place has been destroyed. There's not much left except for each other, you know. But we are the ones that have to choose which one of these two sentiments will win out. You know, again, if we get our boots off the Palestinians' necks, they will create a decent society just like anybody else would. But if we don't, then you know, people talk about the October 7th attacks all the time, which is fine. But there's a simple fact of the matter, which is that if you treat people like animals, eventually they'll act like it. And that's not that hard to understand for anyone with half a brain. So that's all I have to say about the public health situation in Gaza, because I wish there was more to say about it, but there isn't. There is no rebuilding of any significant substance going on. And there won't be unless we make political changes. And that's I think probably the most important thing to realize. So, but yeah, if anybody has any thoughts or any questions, happy to answer them.
Yeah.
Oh, the chat? Oh, yeah.
Just open it up for me.
Appreciate the brutal honesty. What was the name of the book? The one, oh, so there are two books written about Gaza, at least in English. I'm sure there's more in Arabic, but unfortunately I can't read it. And probably more in Hebrew as well, but I can't read that either. But there are two books that if you want to know what Gaza was before October 7th, you really should read. The first is that book by Sarah Roy, her Saroy, and it's called The Gaza Strip: The Political Economy of De-Development. Make sure you look at the expanded third edition because that came out in 2016 after the 2014 assault. And the other one is called Gaza: An Inquest into Its Martyrdom. It's by Norman Finkelstein. I've edited some of his books, so it's not. I don't get any money or anything if you buy it. But but that book, just to piggyback on what I said a minute ago, that it's a political choice we have to make. Like I said, the book is called Gaza: An Inquest into Its Martyrdom. But the first line of the book, and I thought this was good when Norman wrote it. The first line of the book is, "This book is not about Gaza. This book is about what has been done to Gaza." Those are different things. And it's actually, I wish you had gone further, because we're the ones that did it. That's what's important to understand here. And we can stop doing it. You know, it's not just, oh, we have to beat ourselves up and say we're the worst. No, that's not the point. We're doing this and we can choose to stop doing it. That's a major point that people should appreciate. And just incidentally, you know, I know there's it's just kind of actually a crazy. When Randall and I were talking about the lawsuit and all the other stuff going on, you know, the right now universities are still in the middle of kind of following up on all this ridiculous suppression of student speech, and you know, the idea that students can't run a course. That's insane. I mean, a university is supposed to be a free learning environment. You're not free meaning costless, but like open, right? It's supposed to be, you know. And a critical part of academic freedom is that departments actually control their own business. The administration's not supposed to have anything to do with it. And somebody mentioned the med school having been a particular point of, and this is true everywhere. The med schools are probably the worst. I've had at least half a dozen talks canceled, like literally the day before, the week before. And it's not because of the department. It's not because the surgery department doesn't want to hear because all I'm going to talk about at a medical school or a surgery department is the technical aspects of what I did in Gaza. How did I innovate? How did I, you know, things like that? Because I'm a surgeon, I'll be talking to surgeons. Somebody will ask about politics for sure, and then I'll talk about it, but that's not the point of the talk. But so the administration, as soon as the administration, meaning like the CEO, the CMO, those people, not the head of the department, the chair of the department. When the C-suite gets a hold of this schedule for the week, they say, "Oh no, that talk can't happen." You know, that'll cost us donors. That'll bring the federal government down on our necks if somebody complains about it. Blah blah blah. And so this kind of points out how important it is that we have to build our own society. Like our society is the problem. You see what I mean? Like that's the issue there. I actually just came on Saturday. I was at the Democratic convention for California, the California Democratic Convention. It was in San Francisco, and one of my a buddy of mine. She happens to she's a Palestinian Christian woman. Her family is from Gaza City. A lot of them died at the Church of the St. Porphyrius when it was shelled. But Dina asked me to come and give a talk about Gaza, and I said I don't know if that's a good idea. I'm not gonna. I don't think it's gonna go well. And she said, I don't care. Just say whatever you want to say. They only gave me 5 minutes, but in the middle of it, the point where I thought I was going to get booed out of the room was when I said that we can blame the Israelis for committing genocide in Gaza all we want, but the fact of the matter is we committed genocide in Gaza. I was very surprised. That actually got a standing ovation. I don't think people are as confused about this as we sometimes think, because the institutions are still trying to push back against people doing anything. UCLA or the state of California with these ridiculous anti-Semitism in school things, or these whatever it might be. But the reason this repression is necessary is because the popular perception has just changed. So there's a lot of ripe opportunity for organization, but it's going to take a lot of work. These institutions are not going to give up easily. But anyway, those are the two books that I would recommend reading. And then there's another one in the chat. Can you tell us more about how you were able to go to Gaza? I mean, I'm a trauma surgeon. I just signed up with an NGO, and then I got fed to the World Health Organization's emergency medical team's mission or mechanism. And actually I tried to go back in November, and the Israelis blocked me from going. The Israelis block, so, and again, I shouldn't say the Israelis because that's just not accurate anymore. The US and Israel block about 30% of healthcare workers from going into Gaza. Actually, kind of random thing that I certainly never thought I'd be saying. I'm suing the Israeli government right now. My lawyer just initiated a lawsuit last week because and it is an Israeli lawyer because this is like this is just completely crazy. But like my case is kind of in my case specifically because I have been very vocal, and I've briefed the UN Security Council, stuff like that. And so in my case specifically, probably that was the main reason that I wasn't let in. But that doesn't explain the other 30 to 50% of people that aren't let in. Like, a lot of them are just some random human being, never posted on social media, doesn't even have a social media account. They're just denied randomly, or like there was a British, I think it was a British orthopedic team that came in. They had 4 or 5 orthopedic surgeons and like 8 or 9 support staff, like scrub techs and circulators and stuff like that. They denied the 5 surgeons and allowed everyone else to go in. Well, okay. I mean, obviously that's obviously just to screw with people, right? Like there's no possible way that how could all 5 of these surgeons possibly have posed a security threat to Israel from the Gaza Strip? It just doesn't make it. It's ludicrous. It's so ludicrous, in fact, that when I know a lot of Israeli journalists now, so when I was blocked, I called them and I said, hey, can you ask around? Because Israel's a small country, right? Every journalist knows every government minister and everything else. So, can you ask around and find out why it was blocked? So Nir Hassan at Haaretz, he went around and he said he asked people. So he went to the Ministry of Diaspora Affairs, which for some reason is who decides who goes into Gaza. They said they didn't block me. He went to the army, and the army said no, it was the Shin Bet that blocked him. The Shin Bet is Israel's domestic intelligence service. It's like the FBI here. But its main job is repressing the Palestinian territories. So he went to the Shin Bet. They refused to answer his questions, which is extremely unusual in Israel. Usually everybody wants to talk to the press in Israel, even the left-wing press. And then he went to the prime minister's office because the Shin Bet reports to the prime minister. And he said very unusually the prime minister's office wouldn't even respond to the query. It's very, very uncommon. And again, it's just not something you do in Israel. You respond to anything that any journalist asks you. So then I said, well, I've been asked by two different groups. One, they're both made up of Israeli Jews and Palestinians who live in Israel, who are professors at Ben Gurion and Tel Aviv universities. So they asked me to come give like little unofficial seminars, So I did. So I was like, okay, I wasn't allowed into Gaza. I'm certainly not going to be allowed into Israel, right? That seems impossible, right? But I'm also supposed to go back to the West Bank in April, at the end of April, to be part of an educational initiative there with a Palestine Red Crescent Society hospital. They're working with Boston Children's Hospital. So I said, I need to know if I'm going to be denied entry. Like I got to find out because this is like a 10-month curriculum. I'm just a 2-week part of it. I don't want it to get all screwed up because I don't get allowed in. So I said, okay, well, I'll fly to Israel. So I flew to Israel from Jordan. And when I landed, there, if you've ever been to Ben Gurion Airport, if you're not Jewish, you go to this area over here where you sit. And the 2 other times that I'd flown into Israel, I was much younger. I was held there for about 12 hours. And so I was expecting the same thing to happen this time. And I was fully expecting to be deported. I was not expecting to get in at all. So I go and they, they take your passport. Oh, can you come with us? So I go into the little room where this guy starts talking to, and he said, "Oh, why are you coming to Israel?" So I said, "I've been invited by such and such. Here's a letter." Okay, why were you in Jordan? And I said, I'm a doctor. I've worked in the Gaza Strip several times, and I was going to go again, but the Shin Bet blocked me from going. Now, this is not the kind of thing you normally say during an airport interview. And so there was a younger woman taking notes, and she kind of like looked at what did he just say that? And so the guy, the older man, who I'm guessing was a Shin Bet agent, he asked me why did the Shin Bet block you? And I said, I don't know. If you ask them, I'd love to know the answer because happy to tell them whatever they're worried about. So then they asked me the other BS questions that Israeli security always ask. What's your father's name? What was your grandfather's name? What religion are you? All these stupid things. And so then they had me go back out to the little waiting area. So like I said, I expected to be there for like another 12 hours, no access to the bathroom, no access to food. The guy gave me my passport 20 minutes later and said, thank you. Thanks for coming to Israel. Here you go. So how can I be a security threat in Gaza, but not in Israel itself? It's completely ridiculous. Israeli society is it's one of the few societies that's similar to the United States in that everyone's armed. Not literally everybody, but if you're a soldier on active duty and you get your weekend off, you're required to keep your weapon on you at all times, and you're required to walk around in uniform at all times. So there's machine guns all over the place. And I'm an American. I know how to use a weapon, or I know how to fire a gun. So if I wanted to hurt somebody, there's certainly no difficulty in doing so. But it just doesn't, it's just completely absurd. So so in terms of the getting into Gaza, it's in a highly uncertain process. We're suing the Israeli government. It's not just me. There's other people involved in the lawsuit as well. And hopefully this issue gets resolved because you kind of have to ask yourself, where else in the world is an intelligence service asked if a doctor can go do his job? That's not a normal thing. You can't explain that with security problems. You can't say, oh, but Hamas, okay, does Hamas take non-Muslim, non-Arabic speaking 44-year-old guys from America? What are you talking about? This is completely stupid. And furthermore, if I was Hamas, you let me into Israel. It's just obviously transparently stupid. It's very hard to, you can't even talk about it because it's so dumb. You just can't, there's no words that explain how stupid this is. They're just how incoherent it is, So that's the situation with getting into Gaza. But yeah, please. You were there. Yeah, there is. Everything's rumor in Gaza, obviously. But yeah, I still remember at European and at Nasser when I was there afterwards as well. But especially when I was at European, people would come in and they were acting like they were on meth. And I work in Stockton, California. I know. Meth is a big part of my life, unfortunately. Not my personal life, but my patients' lives. And I was like, what is going on? This guy can't be on meth. He can't be drunk. Nobody drinks in this society. What is happening? And so finally, he had gotten in a fight with some other guy. The guy had stabbed him in the neck, and it was just he just needed some sutures, but he wouldn't sit still. He's yelling, cursing everybody, and I was like, what is going on? So people told me that there's some kind of Syrian made amphetamine-like substance. They had a name for it. I just can't remember what it was. That's being trafficked in with probably through cooperation between the probably the Israeli government, but probably through unofficial channels and the local Bedouin tribes that are assisting the Israelis right now. The Abu Shabab gang and other that's the one in Rafah. There's 2 or 3 up in the north, but sorry. It might be, honestly, I don't remember. They had an Arabic term for it, but I don't remember. It's apparently all over the Middle East now. It's a huge problem. Yeah. There the first time you went? It was there both times. Yeah. The people might remember that there was a from March 2nd to I guess the end of May or no, the end of June, I guess. Israel cut off all access to Gaza. Nothing, literally nothing went in. No food, no water, nothing. And this is when famine was eventually declared. And this is I'm talking about last year. During that time, the Israelis did allow some trucks to go into staging areas in Gaza, because remember, like if Gaza is like this, only this part is controlled by the Palestinians. This part over here, which borders Israel, is controlled by the Israeli military. So they would allow some trucks to come into that area, and they would all be immediately looted. And they weren't looted by desperate people in a crowd. They were looted by people who were obviously organized. They were visibly armed, et cetera, et cetera. So people, the NGOs started going to the Israelis and saying, look, we can all see from here, from the checkpoint, we can see that those armed people are right there. Can we just take a right and go down a different road? And they'd say, no, you can't. Well, eventually somebody picked up on this in Haaretz. Actually, I think it was near Hassan again. But somebody in Haaretz picked up on this and just interviewed people and said, yeah, no, we're just collaborating with the Israelis. It's all like, you know. And the reason they were doing the reason they were incentivized to do it was because of these drug and cigarette smugglings that were going on. So they would take all this food, rip it open, let all the flour fall everywhere just to get the few cartons of cigarettes or the drugs out. And then they would sell that, you know. Yeah, it's not a pretty picture. Yeah, please, anybody, please go for it. Go for it. Go for it.
Yeah, I was wondering if there's anything you can share publicly, and I understand that you may not be able to, but with this recent series of events involving MSF, Nasser Hospital, and the list of names, why they withdrew with equipment, I've been having difficulty comprehending how this unfolded.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know about Nasser leaving. So again, a lot of stuff in Gaza is rumors. So I'm just a little bit hesitant to trust what I hear like on random social media. Like I really have to know the person that I'm talking to. I can say so for people who probably don't know. So Doctors Without Borders is one of the NGOs that I mentioned it that they're going to be banned for. They as of in a few days they'll officially be banned, unless they're also suing the government. We'll see what happens. In a few days they'll have to leave Gaza, and so apparently they've kind of packed up early at Nasser. Now at Nasser they did most of the most of the birthing and most of the orthopedic reconstruction of limbs, and there was a rumor that they like took a lot of their equipment home with them and stuff like that. I don't know if that's true or not. If it is, it would be like oddly petty and strange. Like why would you take, just leave it there? But but that being said, another thing happened with MSF at Nasser, which was really very odd. It was very unusual, and we still can't figure out what this deal was. MSF put out a statement. They didn't advertise it, but of course it got picked up quickly. They put out a statement that the reason they're leaving Nasser, despite having very publicly pushed back against the Israeli military, saying, this new requirement is ridiculous, it's going to force, blah, blah, blah. This whole thing was public. But when they eventually they put this statement on their website saying that the reason they're leaving Nasser is because there's been an increase in the number of gunmen around Nasser Medical Complex. Now, I've spent 3 weeks there. Other people have been there. Like I have a friend there she's there right now named Bing Lee. She's been there for months at this point. I think is Nahan there? I can't remember. There's other people there that are there too. And they also, what are these people talking about? This is completely ridiculous. I do happen to know somebody at MSF who knows the people, the MSF people specifically on the ground. And she said none of them are the ones that made that statement. It was made by MSF headquarters, and they have no clue where it came from. They were all very surprised by it. So what the deal is with that, I don't know. It's very odd. It's very, very odd. But I will tell you that, I've written 3 letters to the president, first 2 to Biden and then 1 to Trump. The one to Trump was signed by 152, I think, American healthcare workers who've worked in Gaza. Probably a third of us worked at Nasser Medical Complex, and we all agreed that the statement that we have never seen anything even remotely approaching militarization of a hospital in Gaza was correct. So, because, one thing to realize, it's normal for there to be guns in a hospital. There's guns in every American hospital. There's guns in every Israeli hospital. It's actually normal for the military to have hospitals. In Gaza, I don't think Hamas has any hospitals, but but it would be normal for them to do so, for them to have hospitals. It's not normal to conduct military activity from a hospital. It's not normal to conduct what are called acts harmful to the, or not, I shouldn't say not normal. It's not legal to conduct what are called acts harmful to the enemy from a hospital. But just having an armed, like if a policeman goes to a hospital, is that a militarization of a hospital? Not hardly. It's completely ridiculous. Like the police bring people to my hospital all the time because they get in drunk driving accidents and they put them in handcuffs and they bring them to my trauma bay. They're armed when they come in. Does that mean Canada can bomb my hospital? No, it's completely silly. So that there's a lot of like misunderstanding about this on on Twitter or whatever, where people say, "See, there's an armed guy at the hospital." It's like, yeah, no, that does not reach the standard of, oh, okay, now I get to bomb this hospital. Those are just completely different things. Because again, just think about it in reverse. Would anybody accept, Soroka Medical Center is the major medical center in Beersheba, which is the closest. It's the like our equivalent of a level 1 trauma center. It's very, very proud. I think it should be. It's very proud of the work that it's done in taking care of Israeli soldiers. That's good medical work. It's difficult to fix people who've been blown up and ripped to shreds. So when if you go into Soroka Medical Center, at the front of the hospital, you'll see Soroka is Israel's medical Iron Dome. The entire hospital is empty of civilians. It's a civilian hospital, but it has been taken over by the Israeli military. Military helicopters land there. People come into the hospital with their firearms, with their grenades, et cetera, et cetera. Does anybody think that means Hamas can go raid Soroka? That's crazy. It's completely idiotic. It's like, I'll give you another example. On March 23rd of last year, I was at Nasser. And I was headed down to one of my patient's rooms. He was a 16-year-old boy named Ibrahim, and the Israelis blew that room up. They'd fired a drone-fired missile directly into it. They wanted to kill the other guy in the room. Then the reason they wanted to kill him was they said he was the prime minister of Gaza. Okay, that raises a serious question. In December of 2024, so just a few months before that, Benjamin Netanyahu had checked himself into a hospital in Jerusalem to have his prostate removed because he had prostate cancer, or I presume he had prostate cancer, I don't really know. But he checked himself in to have his prostate removed. Now, by every account of this, he did actually militarize that hospital. He started having meetings with his war cabinet there. He stayed there for 3 or 4 days. He started having meetings with his war cabinet. He started giving orders, et cetera, all from his hospital room. Okay, does anyone think that means you can bomb that hospital? It's just outrageous. Nobody thinks that, So it's just the whole idea of this whole idea that hospitals in Gaza have in any way been militarized, especially not in some systematic way that would justify leveling half of them, is just completely absurd. Just bonkers. Yeah, please.
I just wanted to say thank you for making that point. It's not something I've ever thought of before, but it's a very good point.
Oh, thank you.
When we talk about how, and we all know like supplies aren't let in, I'm wondering about money. Like, there's a lot of people who donate like PCR and I know these are under like that chain they hired out. But is any of that money able to get in? Is Israel also blocking all donations, like that?
Honestly, I'm not sure. This is something we talked about earlier, or in the morning, as well. But Gaza is not a normal place. Like I mentioned, it's under blockade. What that means is like we bought all this stuff, right? Well, just through the magic of commerce and whatever else, all that stuff is going to be replaced in the places that sold it to bring it here, and then someone's going to grow more food. That's just going to happen automatically, and money is the thing that sets off that chain of events. In Gaza, that's just not the case. There's a very limited supply of everything in Gaza, and the only people that decide whether or not, money has nothing to do with whether or not more stuff can come into Gaza. That has to do with the whims of the Israeli commander on the day, and whether or not the CMCC will ever actually do its job. Yeah, well, there's a ton of, I mean, then that's the thing. There's way more food near Gaza than Gaza actually needs, but it's not being allowed into Gaza. And so there's no such thing as a market in Gaza. Like there's no, there's places where people can go and try to buy things. It's true, but that doesn't result in anything more actually coming into the territory. So if you send people money in Gaza, what you're doing is, and I hate saying this because people want some way of helping, and I understand that. But when you send money to Gaza, what you're doing is privileging one person over another. And that's not necessarily bad. Like if you can help somebody feed their children, we shouldn't. I'm not trying to make anybody feel bad about doing that. Like I have done that. I can't now, but I have done that. It's fine. But you're not like what you're doing is saying like, I have these 20 tomatoes that I was going to sell. That person has 5 shekels, but that person has 10 shekels. So they're going to get them. And that just means there's no tomatoes left. It's not like, oh, great. So now we'll grow more tomatoes. There's no way to do that, So it's a really, really difficult problem. The only way to right now, Gaza is so unbelievably deprived that it can't even be the object of charity, which is kind of crazy if you think about it. But if you think there's actually it's not that hard to understand. Imagine if somebody said, I want to send a donation to the Warsaw Ghetto. You'd be like, what the hell? What? That doesn't make any sense. Why don't you just stop making it a ghetto? that's what you should do. No, like that's but I actually don't know the answer, but I kind of wonder, were there German groups trying to send charity to the Warsaw Ghetto? There might have been. And they were trying to do good work. If there were, it sounds like that's good work, it might help somebody. But at the end of the day, there is no way to charity your way out of this problem, just like there's no way to doctor your way out of this problem. The problem is that we're creating a humongous humanitarian disaster on purpose.
And just to follow up that.
Yeah.
Like the past, really like rebuild, are they not being allowed to use that money at all? Say like, but I guess in previous years and wars, they've been able to rebuild quicker, and this is the longest. I mean, they're always complicated, but it's the longest one.
Yeah.
We're gonna entire.
Yeah, so that is actually, and I'm not trying to contradict you. I'm just pointing out that's actually a misunderstanding of the history. In 2008 and 9, that was when Israel carried out what was called Operation Protective Edge. That's after that. That's when the Goldstone report happened, and it was people may not know so in 2008 and in November of 2008, Israel starts this huge bombing campaign against Gaza. It ended up being called Operation Cast Lead. Last 22 days. This bombing campaign was so unlike anything that had been done in Palestine since the Nakba, and I mean that literally, that it really shocked the world. Gideon Levy, he's a political columnist at Haaretz. He wrote an article where he went through kind of this was after the operation was over. He went through the record of what had been done: the attacks on mosques, the attacks on schools, the attacks on hospitals, the attacks on ambulance workers, on healthcare, the killing of 330 children, et cetera, all of which was, again, just completely bonkers from the standpoint of what the conflict, the level of violence that people were used to. I hate the term, but you know what I mean. And the end of his article, he said, this time we went too far, meaning the world's not going to let us get away with this. Amnesty International wrote a report called 22 Days of Death and Destruction about this operation. Human Rights Watch wrote 4 reports about it. And finally, the UN Human Rights Council commissioned a report on the assault, and the first 2 people I think that they approached, both were eminent international jurists. They went to them and they said, we want you to write a report about Israeli war crimes, and they both said, no, I don't want to deal with that hassle. I'm not, I'm just going to it's just going to destroy my whole career. People are going to call me an anti-Semite. I don't want to deal with any of this. So finally, they found a guy named Richard Goldstone. Richard Goldstone had been a judge under the apartheid South African government. He's a South African Jewish person. His daughter has made Aliyah to Israel. She emigrated to Israel as a Jewish immigrant to Israel. He's on the board of the Hebrew, or he was on the board of the Hebrew University, the board of trustees of Hebrew University of Jerusalem. He's the preeminent Zionist, right? And I'm not even using the term pejoratively, just he's the preeminent Zionist. And so they went to him So he said, well, I want my mandate to include investigating Hamas's crimes. They said, okay, fine. And then he said, well, now I can't really not write this report. I just said this is what I want, and they gave it to me, so I kind of have to do this. So he went and did it, and it caused an uproar. It's like a 700-page long report, and the conclusion is, or the first line of the conclusion is, the operation in late 2008 and 2009 by Israel in Gaza was an attempt to punish, humiliate, and terrorize a civilian population and to rob it of the ability to provide to itself the necessities of life. I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but that's basically what it said. It's a really shocking document. Now, everyone went crazy when this happened because now you have this lover of Zion coming out and making these crazed claims. You know, Israel murdered children on purpose. Israel bulldozed an entire chicken farm for no reason. Just to, you know, again, the only purpose of bulldozing a chicken farm is to make sure people can't eat chicken, right? It's not complicated. So all of this happens, and Israel is in this huge bind. It's a total public relations debacle. Even Obama is saying some of the right things occasionally. You know, like it's really bad. No, it's really, really bad for them. And so they actually, Netanyahu gets out of office for a little while, and and so the Israelis allow Gaza to be rebuilt under this really serious pressure campaign coming from the whole UN system, coming from the US at one point. So they allow Gaza to be rebuilt. By 2012, all of that's gone. Richard Goldstone has recanted the report, probably after being blackmailed, but nobody really knows. He's recanted the report. Israel has gotten rid of all these UN inquiries and all this other crap. So then 2014 comes around, and that's when Operation Protective Edge happens. And the destruction of, you know, if you read the latest edition of Roy's book that I was mentioning, she writes that, I think I mentioned it already, she writes that the Operation Protective Edge dealt something of a death blow to Gaza's economy, completely destroys the place, destroys everything that's productive, et cetera, and leaves the population completely and totally dependent on humanitarian aid. At that point, nobody rebuilt Gaza. In fact, most of the damage from 2014 hadn't been rebuilt by 2023. There's a really good article on this, actually, called, there's a good article about how the UN actually became the enforcer of Israel's blockade after 2014. I forget the name of it. If anybody wants to just email me, I have it. I just can't remember the name of it right now. But it was written by, I think, researchers in Qatar. But they go through the history of what was called then the Gaza Reconstruction Mechanism, the GRM, and what they point out is that the GRM basically did what the CMCC is doing now. They set up the office and they said, okay, well, Israel has final security veto over whatever, and so they just kept saying nothing can come in. So no significant amount of cement came in, no significant amount of anything came in. You know, people talk about like the tunnels, right? All these tunnels that were built by Hamas and they used all this cement. Most of that cement was actually recycled from the destruction that Israel had caused. A lot of the metal that Hamas uses in its tunnels was actually, it's kind of a bizarre story. It's actually, a lot of it is harvested from a World War I British frigate that was sunk off the coast of Gaza that they happened to find. So they learned to dive to dismantle this ship and then bring metal panels. You know, none of this had anything to do with aid. It was completely ridiculous. So actually, Gaza had not been rebuilt, which is really kind of a surprising thing if you think about it. You know, after 2014, I still remember this. There was I don't remember which publication it was in, but some mainstream journal like New York Times or Time Magazine or something like that. There was actually a story about how a new wedding gift in Gaza is a wall. That people would say, my house has been destroyed, so let's just shear off this wall and maybe that can close up your house over there. So congratulations on getting married. You know, it's just the level of destruction is just, it's really not something that's well understood. And I don't mean to make you feel bad for not knowing that. It's not nobody knows this, you know, like literally nobody knows this, because it's just not, you know, even though these things are sometimes reported in the mainstream press, it's not like it's ever repeated, right? Like the same thing with my New York Times article, right? Like I was able to write a report on what 65 American healthcare workers had seen in Gaza, and we talked about the widespread shooting of small children in the head and the chest, the starvation, attacks on pregnancy, attacks on childhood, attacks on education, attacks on the healthcare workers, and the Times published it. In fact, they published it very prominently, but then it just went away. It's not like it became part of the everyday story. Oh, yes, on October 7th, Hamas killed 1,153 people in southern Israel. And by the way, Israel is shooting children regularly in the face. That's just not that doesn't become the context within which they report these things. So no, it's really it's a shocking story actually. Like again, that book, those two books by Roy and Finkelstein are really, really worth reading to know what Gaza was before October 7th. No matter how bad you think it is, every time I reread one of those books, I find something else that I'm like, geez, I forgot about that. It's really a shocking story. Yeah, please.
Do you have any insight on why we as a society seem to have some kind of difficulty with our thought processes? And I noticed this with myself, where when we consider the crimes that are being committed by the Zionists, we somehow kind of, and I'm not enough to fight this, I somehow kind of step back and say, well, I don't want to be in a quote in air quotes, anti-Semitic something. And somehow there isn't like an equivalent term for somebody who, and an equivalent thought process for the act of kind of disregarding all of the things that have happened to the two Arab peoples, not just Palestinians. Do you have an insight as to, have you felt some insight as to what is going on in our psychology? And I remember myself among that, even though I'm very active in protesting against what's going on in Iraq and Gaza and so forth. And I still find myself having that double standard.
Yeah.
I'd like to know if you have some insight into what's going on with that.
Yeah, and just because you, again, I don't think anybody should feel bad about these. We should feel bad about it, but not maybe beat yourself up over it. I still remember I was at European Hospital and it was Ramadan. Both times I went to Gaza, it was Ramadan. Now I'm not Muslim, so I don't, I can't pray with people. And these two men came over to me and they didn't speak a word of English, but they were asking me if I wanted to pray with them, and it took me a second to figure out what they were saying. And then even though I lived in the West Bank, I lived in, I spent a lot of time with Palestinians and with Arabs and with Muslims generally. I know they don't care if I don't pray with them. They're offering, like they're just being nice. They're like, hey, we're going to do this. You got this crazed idea in your head. Oh, maybe it's ISIS in Gaza. So I still remember my heart rate actually went up before I told them, oh, no, I'm not Muslim. When I told them I'm not Muslim, they literally said, welcome. That was the only word in English they knew. And they kissed me on both cheeks and went away. And I thought to myself, what is wrong with me? Why did I think these people were like, why was I even remotely concerned that these people might hurt me when I said that? I know they don't care. I've seen this happen 1,000 times, but so in other words, it's not just you. It's hardly just you, and it's not. But one thing that I think is important here, and this is what I was saying earlier about like we need to. It's good to learn about Palestine, but I think we also need to think about ourselves. It is hardly only crimes committed in Palestine that we don't recognize. You could. Like after World War, one of the big stories after World War II that's just not understood at all is that the United States took the place over and then reinstituted the fascist dictatorships in Greece, in Italy. We ran Italy through the fascist dictatorship and the Italian mob until the 1970s. In Greece, In Greece, we basically did the same thing, crushed a peasant uprising, reinstituted the fascist collaborator monarchy. And in Portugal, we did this is just repeated everywhere. So, sorry.
South Korea.
No. Plenty of. That's what I'm saying. Plenty of places. And in East Asia, it was actually even worse because there the attention of the West was really focused on Europe on the crimes the Nazis had committed, which were barbaric and awful. Really focused on the Nazi Holocaust. Hard not to, obviously, it's a monumental crime. But in East Asia, it was even worse. We basically denazified Germany at the very top level. That was it. Everybody else we integrated into the American counterinsurgency program throughout the rest of the world. And the same was true of Japanese fascists, but to an even more ridiculous degree. Japanese methods of counterinsurgency, torture, et cetera, were all integrated into the CIA and the American military's programs afterwards. So it's not even that we can't recognize crimes. It's not even that we don't recognize crimes committed against Palestinians. We don't recognize crimes at all when we're the ones doing them. And Orwell made a good observation a long time ago. He said I can't remember the exact words, but something like the nationalist has a remarkable capacity, or what? No, he said it's something like the nationalist not only isn't bothered by the crimes his own side commits, but he has a remarkable capacity for having not heard about them. That's correct. And that's just common. I mean, it's not like American society is no different from British society, or probably, I don't know Chinese society at all, but probably from Chinese society. It's very common to think that your crimes are justified and other people's aren't. And by the way, what crimes? Actually, Omar Bartov, I think it was Omar Bartov. He's a Israeli Jewish or Israeli American Holocaust and genocide scholar at Brown. He's the chair of Holocaust studies at Brown. He wrote I can't remember the exact words again. I apologize, but he was writing about starvation in Gaza, and he wrote that the Israeli starvation the Israeli attitude towards starvation in Gaza is we didn't starve anyone in Gaza, and it's good that we did. That's he's correct, but it could also be, you could turn it around and have the United States be the subject of the sentence instead of Israel. The fact of the matter is we are the ones committing genocide in Gaza. It's American airplanes burning American jet fuel, dropping American bombs, outfitted with American guidance systems, and the targets are being chosen by AI software developed by American corporations, most of them just near where I live, near the Bay Area. So we can blame the Israelis all we want. And I think there's another wrinkle to it, which is that we destroyed our own native population here. And it's true that now, a lot of universities start off sessions like this with a land acknowledgement, for example. That's nice. It's fine. But it's meaningless. It's completely and totally meaningless unless you recognize it when it's happening somewhere. Like the point of a land acknowledgement cannot possibly be that, I hope the ghosts of these people are in the room and can hear me. The point of the land acknowledgement is to acknowledge that you're not supposed to do those things. And this is a minimal penance I can pay for it, is take up somebody's time for 5 minutes. It's just exactly the same thing, but how can it be wrong? We did it, I think there's probably, I can't prove it. I just assume that there's some part of that buried deep in the American psychology. But no, we commit crimes all over the world all the time. It's hardly just in Palestine. And it's a very, very unfortunate and very rough realization, but there's a positive to it, which is that, again, we're the ones doing it, which means we can stop doing it. There's no law of nature that says the United States has to be committing genocide in Gaza and has to be funding the rapid support forces through the UAE and in the murdering everybody in Al-Fasher in Sudan. And there's no law that says the US had to help Indonesia commit genocide in East Timor. There's no law that says the Mayan people in the hills of El Salvador and Guatemala had to be slaughtered in the 80s. None of this is, even just think about, do you benefit from these things in some way? Like, how did the genocide of the Timorese ended in 1998, if I'm remembering the year correctly? I was 16. I don't remember benefiting from that in any way. I mean, has anybody here benefited from the Gaza genocide? Maybe your stock in Lockheed Martin went up marginally or something. Nobody would think that's worth it. No, I'm serious. Like that's like the only thing you could possibly come up with. And yeah, that's why divestment things are actually very good. But that's it's not, and again, it's just not hard to show people this. Everybody can understand this. The vast majority of people are very decent and they can understand. I guess he didn't like my answers to things, but what he was saying was like sometimes we have this block, and that's true. But when you point it out to people, they almost universally say, "Oh yeah, that's a good point." Actually, I'll tell you if we have to go. Sorry, don't. If you're trying to creep towards the stage to get me off. But there's a podcast called Know Your Enemy. And I'd never listened to it, but I'd heard of it. It's like a guy who's kind of like a socialist, and then a guy who used to be a right-wing nutcase and is now a socialist. So know your enemy, right? And they talk about like right-wing politics and what's going on in like the MAGA world or whatever. So these guys reached out to me from the Know Your Enemies podcast, which apparently is not the same thing. And I didn't realize that until I logged in on this Zoom call. And the Know Your Enemies podcast is a hardcore right-wing MAGA podcast. So I was like, okay, did not realize that's what I was getting myself into. So now I'm like, well, I don't want to like get into a shouting match with these guys on Zoom. Like that's yeah, that just doesn't work. But how is this going to go? I don't know how this is going to go. I said, you know what? I'm not going to soften anything. I'm going to just talk like I normally talk. And at some point, so we start talking, and it was kind of interesting from their standpoint. These people are very, very, very just anti-institutional. Like they just think everyone's if there's two people in a room, they're lying about something, right? So they were like, we here at it's run out of. It's run out of something called the MAGA warehouse in New York. It's like they're like, we here at the MAGA warehouse. We don't believe what we read in the media, and we don't believe our government, and we don't believe this and that. And they were like, but you've been in Gaza, so you just tell us about it. So I told them all the same things I tell everybody. And they're like, oh man, Doc, this is horrible. This is horrible. I've never heard anything. This is so awful. This is so awful. Why are we funding this, doctor? And then the guy goes into some crazy rant about the Rothschilds in Europe and some bizarre, quasi anti-Semitic thing. And I just like kind of gently trying to push back on him on that. And but he asked the same question that this gentleman did earlier. Like, why is it that we're doing this? Why are we involved? What's the mental block? So now I'm sitting there, I'm thinking, oh God, if I criticize the United States with these guys, that's going to be the end of the good conversation, right? So I said what I just said, like that, there's this influence, that influence, whatever. And then I said, but I do think there's something deeper, which is that, we destroyed our own native population. And then I really wanted to test this. I was like, which we shouldn't be proud of. Like I said that explicitly, and I was very, very surprised. These guys are both veterans. They're both like working class guys. These are not sophisticated people. I don't mean no, I don't. I mean like I just mean like they're not like there's not like they don't have like some highfalutin education or something. They're just like these are like normal guys that you're trying to talk to, and they're and I was really surprised. They both said, yeah, no, absolutely, we shouldn't be proud of that. I was very surprised by that. Two military veterans. And there's a study just to explain why I'm so surprised by it. I guess there's a study of there's an official military study, a military history of the U.S. military between the end of the Revolutionary War and the beginning of the Civil War. It's written by an official historian. I forget his name now. The official army historian. What he writes is that the conclusion of the book is between the Revolution and the Civil War, the American army had two main purposes: felling Indians and American workers. Those are his exact words. So so I presume that in army school you don't learn. Oh yeah, we shouldn't have destroyed the natives. No, that's we had to clear the way for civilization, all sorts of other crazy stuff. But no, I was very surprised. They absolutely just they had a sensible understanding of it, and so I was surprised by that, but maybe you shouldn't be, or maybe I shouldn't have been, because these are reasonable people with decent human values. Yes, it's true that they're heavily propagandized. I mean, it's kind of hard to you guys are probably too young to have listened to Rush Limbaugh, and you're probably better off for it. But the kind of stuff that these people have crammed down their throats constantly, and keep in mind they don't have access to any other kind of information. We can all go to Dropsite News or read something, but that's just not the milieu that these people run in. So they don't really have access to alternative information, and despite that, they still have pretty reasonable ideas in their head. It gives you some hope for what can be. In other words, elite culture is not necessarily the culture of the people, which is probably one of the major reasons that the elites hide so much from regular people, because they think they're all psychopaths. And the Epstein files are kind of an extreme example of it, right? But nevertheless, it's true.